Today we're going to learn about glue sponges. Where you press a paper onto the sponge, it adds a thin layer of glue and you can stick it on like a sticker. So the way I make glue sponges is I take clean sponges and these kind of sandwich containers. I pour a lot of glue on the sponge the night before, completely covering it. Once the sponge is completely covered with glue, I put the lid on and I store it overnight. This allows the glue to go into the sponge and absorb. Here are the rules about the glue sponge. First, when you use it, do not pick it up out of the container. Second, your hands must be clean. That means you either wash your hands or you use hand sanitizer because we don't want extra germs to get on the glue sponge while it's closed. And then the third rule is the instructions, which is you take your paper, press it onto the sponge, not the extra stuff around the sponge, and peel it off. And it puts a thin layer of glue. If for some reason it's not working, ask your teacher to flip over the sponge for you because all the glue might have sunk to the bottom. Please do not flip it over yourself. And to recharge our sponges, what happens is that each week the sponge will be refilled with glue and set over the weekend so that way it can be ready for the next class. So let's look at an example of how to use a sponge. You can see that this one has a thin layer of glue on the back and we press it down. So each time you take a smaller paper to put on your background, you're going to press it into the sponge and touch all the corners and edges so that you get glue all over the back of the smaller paper. Then, when I put it onto my background or bigger paper, I am making sure that I rub the whole paper so that the edges aren't coming up. So full contact with the sponge and then full contact with the paper is best. You shouldn't really have big chunks of glue coming on your side because of the sponge. Remember not to use the gunky stuff around the sponge. If a paper is too big, you can always do one side of the paper and then move it and then press down the other side of the paper. Here's some examples of some first graders doing some seascapes. You can see that there's not a lot of glue coming out of the edges of the paper because they press their paper down carefully to the glue sponge and then immediately place it onto their paper.